So continuing on with digital consumer behavior and customer relationship and experience management, let's look at digital buyer persona. Now, personas are really exciting because we get into a bit of the psychology here. So Exhibit 3-3 is in your textbook, but we see it here. Buyer persona elements. So a digital buyer persona consists of key details an organization knows about its target consumers. These include demographic variables, customers' goals and frustrations, preferred technologies, and channels. So we see here in the exhibit, there's some key considerations in building some buyer personas. So we see the name of the persona, occupation, or status of an individual, demographic data, geographic data, psychographic data, behavioral data, goals and values, and problems looking to solve. So those are the initial 8. Let's walk through this. So Exhibit 3-4, digital persona buyer, digital buyer persona template. Now, I will tell you there's a number of sites online where you can get some really good help with AI in doing this. Just remember that whatever it is that you may turn in as your example in this course must be done by you and not by AI, but there's no harm in using AI to look at some examples to get an idea to reinforce if you're going the right direction or wrong, or show you some ways, and maybe they're wrong. So you always have to consider that as well. This should be built by you, but you want to be thinking through ways you can use technology to help guide you in the right direction. Some key considerations in building a buyer persona. A persona should not be built in a way that limits target marketing. It's likely that not all target markets will have the exact characteristics identified. You should be learning from this as you go. It's appropriate to build separate personas for different offerings within an organization. And the template in Exhibit 3-4, which we'll go over in the next slides, represents an example of a buyer persona for a healthy breakfast product. And of course, healthy, I should put in inverted commas because healthy can be a very misleading term. The whole wellness space is a bit fraught with scandal from time to time. And so be careful with words like healthy, well, those types of things. We want to make sure that it truly is authentically what it says on the box, whatever the product or service might be. So let's walk through this buyer persona template. So we've got John Chan. We tend to name those that we are creating personas for. So we have in the early days of creating personas, we used to say that we would know these personas so well that if we passed our target market on the street, we know what they looked like, who they were, and what they were going to do next. So that's how specific it is. And it really does help different team members who learn in different ways, or things resonate differently with us at different times in our lives, or whatever it might be, to have the picture of some sort of stock person that embodies these elements so we can better kind of get our heads in the right space. So again, John Chan, he's 46 years old. He identifies as a male. His location is primarily Jackson, Florida. And think of location again, primary, secondary. People can, depending on your target persona, move around quite a bit. They may live one place, work another. Since the pandemic, people have shifted and changed their work-life balance in lots of different ways. So don't make any assumptions about maybe them being based in more than one location. There's also considerations around those that are caregiving. So they may have a young family, and that's in one location, but they also may have adult relatives that they're caring for various reasons that are in some other location. And so they have a definite interest in both of those places, but they may or may not be in the same geographical area. So the pull of those two things, those needs, those wants, those are all things that can help us better nuance our personas as we develop them and as we learn about them, and as we reconcile the analytics data that we're taking a look at and go, why is this person showing up as this when I'm actually seeing this behavior in the purchase process? And that those types of differences and considerations may help you reconcile those things. The property is a single family home. Usually we'll want to say if it's a single family home they own or rent, and about how much their cost is with that. So you can get very specific with these. Values, health, work, family, and status. An example quote around that is, I want a fast, healthy breakfast on the go. So again, that's an example quote as relating to the product we're going to be talking about. Goals, need for a healthy go-to breakfast option that doesn't take a lot of time. And of course, time is relative, so we have to consider that too. We may put some specificity around that as we know more about the market. So if this were my area of expertise and I was going to market with this, I'd want to put more detail around this if I could. Frustrations and challenges. No time to eat in the morning, needs to get up and go, often needing to prepare for a trial, meeting clients, or reviewing legal documents. So now we see that this person I forgot to say occupation status, they're a lawyer, their income level is 150 plus. Often we're separating out the individual's income from the household income. We usually will make that delineation. So here, this should be his individual income, whether or not he lives alone. We want to kind of make that clear whether or not it's a household or not. And then status for him would be upper middle class. That's another sort of tricky one because what is upper middle class? 150,000 obviously doesn't go as far in California as it does in, say, Oklahoma or Nebraska, some of the other places in the country that actually have been targets for tech companies to look at because it's frankly cheaper for folks to live. And so you can employ more people with less risk because the overall cost is not as much. So just keep all of that in context because when it comes to disposable income, John may have much less disposable income than someone making significantly less than him, maybe even half of what he makes in a different part of the same country. Again, part of what makes the United States a very interesting and broad market and somewhat difficult to market to effectively without some thinking through in very specific examples like this. Continuing on with our template, what are our technology mix or channels? Well, email, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and blogs, targeted print, so usually targeted print advertising, and online professional journals. Personality, loyal, debater, counselor. Motivations, convenience, quality, personalized. So again, that personalized piece, probably a way that that might equate in a healthy context would be if there are diet preferences, are there allergies, those basic health questions that are, some are preferences, some are requirements. So if he has a shellfish allergy, for example, that's absolutely a requirement. You don't want, I mean, obviously we don't ever want to hurt anyone. That can cause a death. So we want to make sure that we know what those things are and we put them in some order of priority. So, you know, diet preference maybe between vegan and vegetarian may not matter to him as much, but an allergy is an allergy. It's life or death. So, you know, again, making sure that as we're going to market and as we're looking at our target persona in a food category, I'd break those out. I'd actually break out the difference between those two. And also gluten sensitivity or preference for gluten-free doesn't necessarily mean that person is gluten intolerant too. And that's also not an allergy. It's a different kind of autoimmune issue. So again, when it comes to health and wellness, what are the things that person might be doing or taking to help with that as well? And that can be also giving you, as you're learning that and collecting that information, how can you use that to then better serve the population that you've already converted in terms of potential add-on products and services? So how we serve goals. Our Ascent series blenders offer state-of-the-art design with power and precision, high performance, wireless connectivity. They're programmable to save time and also can be personalized, right? They are the ultimate convenience and they're versatile and you can use them at home or on the go. So that's how we used the example to bring it to the example of our specific blender. Bring your own persona, BYOP. A different view of the digital buyer personas is the concept of bring your own persona, or BYOP, which is the idea that instead of people showing pattern, predictable behaviors that can be segmented into targeted buyer personas, consumers bring their own levels of digital comfort to the buying process. So BYOP does categorize digital consumers somewhat based on digital capability, which would be limited to advanced, trust or extent to which they share their data, high or low. So think about their cookie settings, whether or not they're using a VPN, those types of things. Digital marketers must be ready to recognize and adjust to various buyer personas to remain relevant and successful. So this is really important, I think, to think about because I actually think about BYOP, or bring your own personas. I try to break things down into things that I can understand. So I remember in the advent of seeing personas that had irregularities in terms of looking at the analytics data and doing work for different companies where we'd be looking at, okay, why is there this difference? Why do people appear to be a certain age group or demographic, but then their choices aren't necessarily following through on what that demographic, what their wants and needs are that we've identified? And by going through the exercise of trying to iterate by revising and improving our persona, we're still not able to kind of resolve these differences. And I sort of think of it as someone like, I think about my mom. So my mom is someone in her 70s, and what it can mean to be someone in your 70s in terms of digital proficiency is so broad. So it can be someone we think of as an elderly person who may not have experience with the web, maybe a Luddite, maybe really resistant to technology and new things. But they also might be like my mom, where sometimes she's telling me influencers that like the lipstick or gloss that I have that I picked up at the airport that I didn't even know an influencer was potentially interested in. So far ahead of the curve that if I was looking at her persona online and I was mapping her, I might think that she's a Gen Z or millennial when she's actually a much older age group. So that affects her demographic profile in terms of income availability, her class, um, lots of different things, her marital status, all of these things that can be really important to us when we're trying to buy or sell goods and services. Same thing is true of kids, of anyone really in any age group. We can really look or seem a lot younger or older. So the idea of bring your own persona takes sort of the idea of needing to go into a detailed persona, and it kind of puts a question mark on how much do we really need to know? Or is it really just we need to know how advanced they are as a digital user and if they're sharing their data? Because the data, it may tell us everything, right? It's going to tell us hopefully demographic information, give us a good sense of, what their lifestyle factors might look like, those types of things. So I think you want to take in a combination of what works for you at any given time and definitely try both. So I think that this is another instance where I talk about those that are successful in digital marketing in particular, are those that are flexible. So looking at these two things, not as two concepts that compete with each other necessarily, but two that can actually complement depending on either using one or the other for our needs and what those needs might be, with the organization that we're working with. But also, is there a way of using a combination of both or trying both out at the same time, or within two different parts of, it's nice when you have teams of people that you're working with. And one nice way to collaborate is one person's looking more at the BYOP model, and in your group may be looking more specifically at a set of personas that you're iterating on, say, quarterly. And you can therefore kind of learn from each other, if that makes sense. And you're trying to use data to back up everything you do. So, how much data you're going to be able to get on a continual basis remains a question, is constantly evolving. Again, the only thing that's a constant in the world of digital marketing is change. So getting comfortable with that change and being very agile and adaptive to it really can help make you very successful. So, moving on from the bring your own persona, we look at consumers and their data. So, privacy and security considerations in digital marketing, extremely important. We always want to take those very seriously, and they vary around the globe. Different consumers attach different value to their data and its privacy. Organizations that collect consumers' private data need to consider the data that they collect, what it may be used for, how to store it, and think about how to store it legally within the jurisdiction in which they operate, and whether or not the jurisdiction that the person lives in may be different. So, say it's international, you may need to be thinking about GDPR opt in as well as ICANN spam opt-in, for example. So between website and email, you've got, different laws from different countries, international laws or laws that are adopted sort of more widely internationally, some that aren't. And, storing information like, say, audio, any voice recordings that come out of a purchase process. So on Amazon, we may be using, for example, the voice option to search. Alexa's keeping that information, or it's part of that body of AI and machine learning for Amazon. How are we opting in for them at Amazon to store that information and track us? It's really important. And you think about, when we potentially, let's say for recording our workplace meetings, let's say we're using Zoom, there's a lot to think about in terms of opting in to recording of those for using AI assistants, for example, to write up the notes and to provide action items to follow up on. And of course, getting consent for those things. Sometimes it's built into products. For a long time in Zoom, for example, you had to ask people if they opt in to be recorded, or tick a box, or actively do something to let people know that they're being recorded and ask them to opt into it, or say that they're not opting into it when they come into a meeting environment. Whereas now it's more based on where that person is coming from and where you are in terms of whether or not you're allowed to record with or without consent. So there's states in the United States, as you may know, that are two-party consent states. So each person must consent to be recorded, regardless of the use of the recording or whether it's going to be used, not used. If it's recorded, it has to have two-party consent. And in other states where only one party has to consent. So I can decide to record your voice, and you have, I don't have to ask you if it's okay to record your voice. And again, I could be using it for any purpose. But again, that's where it gets to the storage of recordings and our locations as things get international, where we store things in databases. Are we offshore? Are we in the United States? Where are we located? Those all can really matter a lot. And then when and how do we delete the information? Is it really deleted? I mean, we really want to be looking at what is our responsibility here and taking that really seriously, because I think it can't be understated how all of this goes to that trust and authority that we're trying to build. And I think if we're good marketers, we want to treat others how we would want to be treated and try to really honor as best we can everyone's wishes. And the tricky thing about that is, as a lot of people have been burned in different situations, if you think about social networks, there's usually an example every week of some way somebody's finding out about a scam or some other practice that's regular within digital communities or by the social networks themselves that can be harmful to society. And as those things are debated and become more widely aware in the public sphere, we have to think about how much, people are trusting or not trusting related in relation to our organization as we go. And so again, all we can do is do the best we can with what we've got. But if we're trying and we're actually putting some thought into this, I think using privacy and security considerations as one way of thinking about how can we tailor to the customer, how can we enhance their customer experience. I think people increasingly appreciate when they see simple opt-ins and ways to opt in, opt out. And I think they're much more likely and will be over time to just, opt in and give you a try if you're just upfront with people. And I think that's a really important thing. I think doing re-opt-ins for email marketing every so often beyond what's required by law is really important. And maybe allowing, I always love it when people, when organizations, companies allow me to more specifically target the kinds of, publications or interests that I have. So if an organization's grown, and let's say I got involved in it at a startup stage, pre-seed funding, they may develop a completely different model to monetize over time because they find the initial model wasn't something that they can do. And that's happened to me because I was early into the internet space. Tons and tons of companies have come and gone, and they found success some other way. And those databases that they had may have been purchased even by second or third or fourth generation companies that have nothing to do with the company that they started as. And so as your data is migrated from platform to platform, you don't always get a chance to opt in again. And so sometimes my actual delay in getting back to you as an individual student might be because of the sheer volume of email that I have that's used to be from a personal friend at a company, that then suddenly that email address is now being used by some other company. And I haven't really found a great AI solution to that, except to try to spend time more thoughtfully going through my emails and, using different tools and processes to try to see what's most makes me most efficient. But I do find that there's a lot of efficiency lost in that process of companies being bought out, my email address being captured, and email being such an important part of our work, kind of the hall of record of so much of what we do. um, that's a very frustrating thing. And I should have been, asked to re-opt in, but I wasn't. Underscoring all of this, by carefully considering factors related to privacy and security, organizations may employ a strategy that benefits consumers. I think it does. I think it just shows another layer of personalization. And I think for those of you that are looking at doing examples, projects on nonprofit organizations, NGOs, et cetera, is especially important and expected.